Hello and welcome to Talk Gnosis, the web's premier talk show about Gnosticism, the esoteric, mysticism, religion, spirituality, conspirituality, conspiracy theory, lizard people, yoga culture, meditation, contemplation, QAnon, and the fact that I am actually JFK Jr. Real heads will get that reference. I am Deacon Jonathan Stewart, joined from Chicago, we have Bishop Lady Peterson.
Hello, Deacon. How you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good.
Good.
I'm live in Montreal, and we're super excited to have part 2 of our show with our guest, Matthew Remski. Before I throw over to Matthew to tell you folks what he's about, you should stop the show, and if you haven't seen part 1, you should watch part 1. I will hyperlink it in the show notes, and it really is a continuation of that discussion. So highly recommend checking out part 1. An awesome show, amazingly relevant to today's life. It's one of the, we don't really, look, I'll let you in on a secret, right? We talk about a lot of interesting things, but can you talk about them with other people? Probably not. These shows of Matthew are going to give you some great new deep discussions to have of those in your life. That said, Matthew Remski, hello. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much, both for having me back. So I am a cult survivor and researcher. I work mainly in the field of institutional abuse in yoga and Buddhist communities. Recently, I just published a feature with the Walrus magazine here in Toronto about Shambhala International, and that'll be in the show notes. And as the winds of COVID blow us forward, I have turned my focus, as so many people have, into trying to figure out what both conspirituality and QAnon mean within the cultic landscape. So I've turned most of my attention to that. Currently, I'm working on another feature that is about how QAnon has infiltrated Canada and how that happens differently, how it shows up differently than it does in a place like the U.S. And so it's a new it's a new chapter for me. There's continuity with the old, but at the same time, QAnon is so different with regard to the previous cultic literature that I think we all have to really stretch our brains and hearts around it.
Yes, exactly. And I remember, I feel almost, I don't know the right way to phrase this without sounding really strange, but it was like when QAnon first started, because I've talked about before, I'm interested in this stuff, and shamefully now that it's having such a big influence, it has a form of almost entertainment. So when QAnon started, I couldn't wait to tell my wife and my cat, my two best friends, being like, "Oh, this is so crazy! It takes in so many different conspiracy theories, and it's so funny, and you won't believe it." And now, I'm sad both because this quirky thing, well, quirky is not quite the right word, that I was interested in is now being known by the whole world. And of course, it's not funny. Like, it's not funny at all anymore, because it's having real world impacts almost every day. Right, it's being reflected in people's day-to-day lives, and of course we'll get into that. So again, I have a question here, and I do want to emphasize yet again to our audience that this is part 2 of of our discussion with Matthew, and the question is: psychedelics and meditation, they've both been booming in popularity lately. Is there some way that these may make people more vulnerable to conspiracy theories and the groups that push conspiracy theories?
It's a great question. On our podcast, we did an episode precisely on psychedelics and the intermingling of psychedelics and conspiracism over the last 6 months or so. And our guest for the episode was a woman named Lorna Lee, who she runs a media platform called entheogen.com. And she told us this extraordinary thing, which is that, lots of extraordinary things, but the two things that stand out were that she had become aware of neo-shamans, or I guess, I don't know, faux shamans. There's there are levels of credibility and accreditation within this very unregulated context, which I don't know that much about. So I'm just really just going to quote from her and from my colleague Derek, who has just published a book on psychedelics called The Hero's Dose. But she said that there were some unscrupulous ceremony leaders who were actually engaged in red pilling their ceremony participants while in states of plant medicine journeying. So people in hyper vulnerable states being told stuff about, the spiritual warfare involving the forces of light and darkness and how Trump is a trickster figure and so on. So that was very disquieting to hear about. The other thing that she said was that there were some key legitimate Amazonian elders amongst the realms of the shamanic priesthood, I guess, within plant medicine culture, who had become ill with COVID over the last little while, and that was likely linked to the fact that there was both a lack of education in the local regions, but also because ayahuasca ceremonies especially are just not COVID safe, and they just can't be. And she also spoke about the economic pressures for these, basically spiritual tourist escapades to continue, even though the rest of the world is in lockdown. And so I think there are some very difficult stories that are emerging in the pandemic conspirituality, QAnon era within psychedelia. But I'd also say that I've heard from various sources and some of the reporting that I've done that plant medicine has been a feature in a number of wellness influencers waking up or, epiphany moments with regard to, understanding that COVID is a hoax, which it isn't, or that, somehow the moment is ripe for spiritual transformation because the forces of authoritarianism are gathering. And I think it really speaks to the fact that often plant medicine is, I think, what they call a non-specific enhancer, or something that will enliven or really exalt any experience or point of view, which is why, as I think Lorna and both Derek pointed out in that episode, the whole notion of set and setting are crucial. That for safe plant medicine experiences and experiences with other psychedelics, there has to be a clear intention for the person who's going on the journey, and there also has to be a real sense of ethical safety. And again, in an unregulated industry, those are things that are very difficult to assess before people plunge in.
Yeah.
With regard to meditation, I would say that the various branches of globalized meditation training all will have components to them that make adherents vulnerable to two things. The notion that in order to be, awakened in terms of your perspective on the world, that you would concentrate on refraining from judgment or refraining from analysis, that you would try to concentrate primarily upon subjective experience instead of, observational experience. And I think, taken to an extreme, that would make a person vulnerable to indoctrination for sure. But then there's another aspect, which is that, in many contemporary religious communities, associated with yoga, Buddhism, the New Age, that meditation itself is a promoter of entrancement and a sensation of timelessness, or repetitive sensation that is both self-soothing but also can put a person into an altered state. And the way that people speak about the experience of becoming indoctrinated into QAnon often, for example, often tracks onto the way people speak about, epiphanic meditative experiences that change their lives forever. The difference being that if you're doing it through meditation, you're in control. If you're being red pilled into QAnon, it's probably the YouTube AI that's in control.
Yeah. So for our next question, there's two parts to this, and I'm sure the first part is a question that's on many people's minds, and it might be on their minds because it is something that's happening to them. So the first part of the question is what do you do to talk to a loved one who's fallen into conspirituality? And the second part of that question, and the second part comes from the part-time Talk Gnosis host, loyal listener, Jason Mevmel. He, like myself, and I think probably many other people, and possibly you and Lainey, agree that QAnon is a heck of a story, right? It's a thriller novel. There's no James Bond movie that has a twisting plot that twists around as QAnon does, and it's also a meta narrative. It brings in every conspiracy theory. I can see why it's gripping. So.
Right.
So the first part is what do we do to talk to a loved one who's fallen into conspirituality? The second one is perhaps more of a statement, but Jason's wondering if they're being consumed by a story, they've been taken over, reprogrammed by a narrative in a way. Is it about presenting a better story, a story that perhaps matches up more with reality?
It's such a great question because one of the things that becomes clear in looking at the world that a brainworm like QAnon actually suppresses or even erases is that it's fairly drab. It's boring. And this was really brought home in the episode that we did with the director of the Center for Controlling Digital Hate. His name is Imran Ahmed, and he said something very simple. He said, nobody tweets the NHS or the National Health Service in Britain. And, here in Canada, we would have, the kind of pokey social media accounts of Ontario Health or Canada Health tweeting out the daily advisory on mask usage and so on. And we see these things perhaps in our feeds, but I don't think many of us think to actually boost or to share that data. I think there's the impression that, oh, well, that's the government. It's doing its thing. It's present on social media. It's trying to do outreach. It doesn't need our help. Well, all of the research is showing that rates around vax hesitancy versus vaccination enthusiasm really depend upon how much the person is getting their news from social media. And so actually foregrounding the data that is streamed to social media from public health agencies would be a good thing to do. And yet it's not very interesting. It would feel like a dorky thing to do to retweet, the Toronto Health Commissioner. At least for some people, unless they're specialists, right? So it's something that I'm actively working at trying to remember to do. But this question of if the person has been swept away by the passion, the complexity, the emotional intensity of a conspirituality or QAnon narrative, what's actually going to replace that? What's going to sound more appealing to them? It's a really difficult question to answer, and I think it became even more sort of apparent to me when I realized in researching one of these articles that I've got coming out, I got to interview a couple of QAnon devotees, and they were both of them were extremely earnest in their framing of their work as being sort of parallel to the work of epidemiologists, right? Like they for them, COVID is a hoax. It's perpetrated by the authoritarian cabal. It's designed to groom us into giving up our civil liberties and accepting, masking and biochipping and all the rest of it, while we give away our children for cannibalism. So that's what the pandemic is for. And while it has its heroes like epidemiologists who are trying to sift through all of this data and come up with very, very complex models for what's going to happen in the future, that's actually what the bakers for QAnon are doing as they sift through the Q drops, and that they try to put together the epidemiology of how the virus of the cabal has spread, and how it can possibly be destroyed. And they're trying to make predictions as well. So it's not just that the person who has been red pilled is in crazy land. They're actually in a carefully structured alternate reality that is parallel to our own. And that's both scary, but it also, to me, it begins to answer or possibly give a window into answering the first question you have, which is, how do you talk to the person who's in that world? And I think the answer is really primarily going to depend upon the strength of the relationship that you have with that person and how secure it is. But I would say that if you can feel, just my gut says from a cult recovery perspective, if you can feel your way into what the person has found so appealing, into what they are so excited about or triggered by or activated by, you'll stand a better chance of showing them that you share their basic human concerns, which happen to be manipulated. And I think that's a really good first step. And then, the basic thing that all the cult recovery literature says is, as the friend, you're responsible for reminding the person, but in subtle ways and in non-intrusive ways, that there is another world still, and that they are welcome to come back to it. And one of the ways that you do that is you just don't criticize. You don't call them. You don't tell them that they're stupid. You don't even tell them that they're wrong necessarily. But because part of the reason that they have entered into this alternate reality is that they were told they were wrong about their experience at some point. And so you don't want to repeat the kind of structural power imbalance that is already part of their storyline. So the individual sort of bits and pieces of like, how do you talk to the person? It really depends on the security of the prior relationship and what cues you would use to remind the person of that, and that's going to be highly individual.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to pause for a moment because I forgot at the top of the show to do our commercial for Patreon. I try to do it early because people will turn it off at the end. I love you. I do the same thing. I'm not judging you. We love you. We do have to use a digital studio to make the show. 99 Perspectives. When you start your own podcast or YouTube show, you should use them too. Which means that without the support of viewers like you, we cannot do the show, as we are poor writers. So if you are able to, please go to patreon.com/Gnostic. You can support us for as little as $1 per month per piece of media there. You can also set a cap. And I know that these are difficult times. So if you're unable to donate and help us out financially, please share the show, put it on your social media, rate and review it, subscribe to us on the podcatcher of your choice, subscribe to us on YouTube. And if you want to do a one-time donation, you can do paypal.me/Gnostic. Okay, so that leads in quite well to my next question. Matthew, is there a financial incentive for leaders who want to be leaders in groups to pivot to conspirituality?
Well, what we've seen so far is that wellness influencers, yoga influencers who begin to adopt conspirituality or QAnon references see their engagement go through the roof.
Mm-hmm.
This happens over and over and over again. Now, I should qualify that by saying that it seems to happen for smaller accounts moving into larger accounts much more strongly than accounts that are already large. So, for example, I think Christiane Northrup has actually lost followers from a peak of something around 545,000 Facebook followers. And as she's gotten deeper and deeper into QAnon rhetoric, I think she's now down under about 500,000. It's still a minor drop, though. It's not like, it's not like what happens when I don't know, a sex predator or something like that is deplatformed. It hasn't hurt her that much. But for sure, the inflammatory rhetoric certainly increases engagement amongst wellness influencers. And, we know that there are strong monetization streams for all of the main QAnon YouTubers. So The Amazing Polly, for example, has 347,000 YouTube followers. And, so she's making substantial money just from her streams. Then there's a merch department. There are books on Amazon. Amazon is selling hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of QAnon products and has not removed them yet. So that's all fully monetized. But I would say that for wellness influencers in general, there's a very fine line to walk where it's almost as if there's a sense that one must test the waters. The really good example that I can bring to the table here is from the feature article that I did for Gen by Medium on Dr. Kelly Brogan and her husband Sayer G. Now, Sayer G is the proprietor of GreenMed Info, which is probably one of the most influential alt health, some say pseudoscience, wellness websites on the internet. It's been open since about 2009. And he has a very powerful digital footprint with something like 450,000 email recipients that he sends newsletters to twice a day. And currently, those newsletters usually have some kind of COVID denialist article or conspiritualist headline in them. And so that's very powerful. Now, as I was tracking the development and the escalation of GreenMed Info's COVID denialism, what I noticed was that Sayer G started to use QAnon-related terms. He would tell people on Facebook that they should take the red pill, for example, and meet him on Telegram. There was a point at which he retweeted a meme from David Avocado Wolf that included the hashtag Pizzagate is real, which is a QAnon hashtag. And so when I'm asking him for comment to clarify his views, whether he endorses QAnon or not, he actually didn't really answer. He didn't take the. You can read the quote in the article, but he didn't take the opportunity to denounce QAnon, and I think that's because it's probably more efficient and let's say it's better marketing to not cut off that, to not close the door on that demographic, on the demographic that finds that discourse attractive. So I'm speculating there. I mean, I don't know why he isn't denouncing QAnon, but I also don't know why he would be using it unless it was working or unless he believed in it to some extent. So now, with somebody like Christiane Northrup, the same kind of conundrum applies. It's like her whole video series on Facebook is called The Great Awakening. And, she will tweet or refer or link to QAnon accounts. She won't herself use QAnon-related language except for phrases like the Great Awakening. And so there's this line that's being walked, it seems, where a certain amount of dog whistling or pointing or coming right up to the edge of QAnon is something that might be beneficial for marketing and for engagement, but to cross over the line might leave one in the territory of vulnerable exposure to the fact that, QAnon is likely the brainchild of a pig farming pornographer.
Right. Lady, another good a good place to pause in case you have any thoughts, feelings, reflections, questions.
Just a couple of things I wanted to bounce off of Matthew here and just kind of bring them up. In terms of the financial incentives, one of the things I'm finding very interesting is the use of certain terms that come right up to being QAnon, but not quite. As Jonathan mentioned at the beginning of the show, or actually just a little while ago, that I'm a poor writer myself. I'm a content writer, and I specialize in search engine optimization. And
Right.
so I'm finding very interesting the use of certain catchphrases and words that may not necessarily be QAnon, but directly, but might be the dog whistles.
Right.
But dog whistled SEO could be very profitable for those who are running websites and who are selling ads.
Absolutely. And QAnon has been very, very efficient at co-opting very compelling terms and phrases and hashtags. So "Save the Children" was at the top of the list there for sure. Yeah,
absolutely. It was the first thing that was going through my head when you were talking about that. So
right.
I'm glad to have that confirmed. Another thing is, it's more of an amusing story. I have a friend who likes to get my goat by coming over and putting up Donald Trump propaganda around my place because he knows it gets my goat. And the funny thing is, I told him he recently left a magnet on my refrigerator, and I mentioned to him that I was doing this show this evening, and he said, "Well, that's kind of funny because when I ordered those Donald Trump the magnets and the other stuff that he likes to troll me with, he said there was a bunch of QAnon stickers in the package." And now it's like, okay, so I'm assuming.
Oh, you mean that he hadn't ordered?
He hadn't ordered them. No, he didn't order. He doesn't believe in QAnon. He's just doing this to annoy me.
That is eerie.
Yeah, I know. And there were QAnon stickers in the package. So I think he probably got them off of eBay. That's my guess. I'll have to ask him about it. But yeah, They just put these freebies in there. And I just thought it was kind of fascinating because there is a money-making opportunity here. You want to specialize in Trump merchandise, if only just to annoy friends. And instead, he ends up with Q propaganda.
Well, I think it would really take like a lot of data science and a lot of like pouring through financials whenever they're available, which is pretty obscure online, to really figure out what the financial impact is of selling conspirituality alongside one's wellness programs. But I can say that it does seem to be a staple of the genre to really mobilize the rhythm of what we might call disorganized attachment, whereby the influencer invokes a certain kind of fear in the consumer, talks about how vaccines are like rape, or talks about how COVID health regulations are the beginning of the dehumanization process that leads to the Holocaust, which is a direct quote from Kelly Brogan. To use all of this menacing and foreboding language, and basically that's the cudgel in one hand, and then to hold out whatever the wellness product is in response to the cudgel or balancing out the cudgel in the other. And of course, that costs money, whether it's a subscription to one's online program, or it's turmeric, or fresh lavender oil, or whatever. There's this back and forth kind of confusion between terror and care that I think is deeply embedded in the structure of conspirituality economics.
I'm thinking also about 15 years ago, I started, about 15 years ago, I started library school. Got a master's in library science, and I took a class on online online research and online web development. And we were learning the difference back then between Web 1.1 and Web 1.0 and Web 2.0. And Web 2.0 was about, Web 1.10 was about you created your own content and put it up there. The Web 2.0 was putting up a platform and leveraging other people's engagement for your own for your own profitability and getting everybody else to make your content for you. And what I'm hearing here is, I mean, you talked about data science. Probably there are not a huge number of people making a large amount of money off of this, but boy, they sure can leverage the masses that they've brought in here to give them the content they need to have the hashtags and the SEO and the stickers, and to make money that way. So this is fascinating.
Right. And to add to that, and I don't want to, I mean, I'll speak about Brogan and G just a little bit more because I researched them so heavily, but one of the things that they're really good at doing is they're good at co-opting the success or aspirational testimonies of their clients or community members and incorporating them into their brand in a very humanizing way that I would argue disguises the ominousness of their COVID denialism. So right now, they're running a campaign called Thank You Body Rally, and it's on Instagram. We did a couple of spoofs of it on our Instagram page where where they have their community members saying, thank you, body, for giving me the symptoms that I needed to understand that would alert me to where I was imbalanced and so I could heal myself. And so the whole theme is about the body is miraculous and it heals itself, and I listen to it, and and the subtext there is for them is you don't need vaccination. You don't need public health measures. You don't need public health. You don't need the medical system. You don't need, medications at all, and so on and so forth, except what we have on our, herbalism website. So there's this collection of community statements that are rallied together, put onto the page, and they end up having this humanizing effect on the rest of the messaging, which is, we're all being controlled by an authoritarian regime that wants us to wear masks as a sign of submission signaling.
A pertinent question, I think. How do spiritual leaders, yoga instructors, meditation instructors, independent Gnostic clergy, not become cult leaders? How do we stay responsible to our own communities?
Yeah, I mean, I think just being able to ask that question is a pretty good sign. And I would say that if you recognize, if you come into some sort of leadership position, the personal work that you would have to do would be to answer the question, how am I managing my charisma, people's transferences and my own countertransferences? And so, if you, it's not like going to psychotherapy training or, becoming a psychotherapist would like cure you of all of that stuff. And there are sociopathic psychotherapists, but like the basic framework of understanding what your impact is on other people, especially if you, are an attractive speaker, for example, that's like personal work. Structurally, if you understand that the modern yoga, Buddhist, and wellness worlds are completely unregulated. And what that means is that there's really no currency for, there's no meritocracy except for charisma within these worlds, right? Like, it's not like Buddhist teachers are being peer reviewed by each other, or it's not like, in the Gnostic community, I don't know if you can prove, amongst yourselves, amongst clergy members who has done, the best qualifying work. I don't know if you have to compare notes or submit yourselves to an examination or anything like that. But like in the absence of that, usually what that means is that charisma is the coin of the realm. And if one recognizes that as a leader, I would hope that one would naturally put in place structural restraints against the excesses of charisma. And that means, a board of directors. It means, not having a dual role of, providing the Dharma talk, but also being in control of the finances. There'd be a lot of like sort of clarity and separation of roles, a lot of scope of practice stuff as well. Here's a big thing in the yoga world is that people come to be, high demand group leaders because somehow they convince the people around them that there's no part of their lives that they are not expert in, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the person who's the really competent, yoga posture teacher at some point becomes lauded as a philosopher when that's totally inappropriate. And so, if the teacher in question doesn't have the self-restraint or really the integrity or the dignity to say, hey, wait a minute, I actually don't know anything about yoga philosophy. That's not my training. I'm going to cite and refer this other expert when you bring me that question. If they don't have that restraint, if they get high on their own supply, let's say, in that kind of narcissistic loop that I think everybody is vulnerable to, then yeah, that would be a red flag. I think the person who's worried about doing that is probably that's a really good defense.
Okay, excellent. Well, yeah, I don't have to worry about any of that due to having complete lack of charisma. So,
right.
Yeah, and being a bad speaker. Thank goodness. Okay, next question is, spirituality is particularly dangerous now. It feels like there's a lot of groups that are intentionally leveraging or weaponizing conspirituality for, say, political power, or what we just talked about, for sales. So that's people selling QAnon merch. That's groups that are promising a way through the chaos if you sign up for their premium membership plan. And of course, Donald Trump is a secret superhero within Q. So of course, pushing people to make political actions, right?
Right. Well, okay. So, with regard to danger, there was just last week, we reported it on the podcast, there was a 4-hour broadcast of one of these online conferences that was dedicated to, anti-lockdown rhetoric and anti-masking efforts and kind of alt health libertarianism. And it was run by a guy named Sasha Stone, who runs something. I forget the name of the organization, but I'll put the link in for you. But the event was called Line in the Sand, and it basically brought together a who's who of conspirituality in the COVID era. So Christiane Northrup, RFK Jr., Rashid Buttar, David Martin. The list just went on and on. It was 4 hours long. Everybody came on and spoke for about 8 minutes, and Sasha Stone hosted the whole thing. Now, I didn't know much about this guy. He is an ex-rock star who is, I think, born in Zimbabwe or something like that. He has an Australian accent. He's living in Bali now, where he owns a resort called New Earth something. But anyway, I kid you not, here are some direct quotes from this guy who kind of looks like, but yeah, I don't know. It looks a little bit Spinal Tappy, but also a little bit like, he's been juice fasting too. And he's obviously extremely charismatic. He says, this is a direct quote, rather than pushing back against legislators, why not get rid of them altogether? I mean, for the love of God, when we're dealing with treason, it doesn't get more serious than that. The treason he's speaking of is, violating civil rights, apparently, through lockdown measures. Then he goes on, when we deal with agendas which are leading to genocide by any other name, surely it's about evisceration. It's about eradication. It's about wholesale takedown of the godless goddamn toxin in our civilizational midst. We should not be negotiating with any ambiguity. This is a Leviathan. This is a Medusa, and we need to take it out altogether. Now, that's very purple prose from Mr. Stone, but it's also, he's inciting violence from a bamboo retreat center in Ubud Bali. And, so what I want to say in response to your question is that this stuff is escalating. People, and I think that there's a very small step to be taken between the messianic wellness influencer who has been used to speaking to their audience in like heightened emotional terms for years in order to sell them on the yoga method or the Vastu or how this particular bamboo hut will connect you with your higher frequencies. It's a very small step between that and seizing on this particular moment to kind of accelerate and heighten a kind of disaster spirituality ethos where, this is the moment where all of the green juice is going to come into play. This is the moment in which every goji berry that we've ever eaten is really going to matter, right? It's like we've been working this program for a long time and now something finally is happening. Now it's all coming together and it is easily politicized. And obviously somebody like Mr. Stone is going to just go ahead and do that. One of his guests, I've referred to, her previously in this hour, Christiane Northrup, went on Facebook a couple of days before Governor Whitmer the plot against her was foiled in Michigan. And she actually said in one of her videos that she agreed with this argument that sheriffs, American sheriffs, are not beholden to their governors, to the federal government. I can't remember what it is, but it's basically she was presenting this argument that if you feel your civil liberties or your constitutional rights are being violated, you should enlist the help of your sheriff, who is not beholden to any other lawmaker. And this is an argument that is made by militia movements throughout the U.S. to try to say that well, actually, we have legal grounds for disobeying federal and state laws, and the sheriffs are going to help us do that. And so, I don't know whether Dr. Christiane Northrup is aware of the connections there. I have the sense when I hear Sasha Stone speaking that he's pretty clear on what he's doing. But again, I don't know who he is asking to eviscerate public health officials, or what that actually looks like. But I'm very perturbed by the fact that I started this Conspirituality project thinking, oh, here are people who are aiding and abetting an attack against public health, and that's not cool. And I kind of know the culture and the background for how that happened. But now I'm seeing that they can actually push it a lot farther than I actually thought.
I'm just thinking a couple of things here. I used to do some back in the day, the late 90s. Into the early 2000s, I did some research and some work in the area of radical racist groups. And there was one, I believe it's called Posse Comitatus, which basically argued that the sheriff is the highest legitimate government official in any area.
Right.
Your local sheriff, that was it. That was right there. And this is going way back.
Yeah, it goes right back to the 70s. It goes right back to the 70s. And in fact, if for the listeners out there, if you ever hear a wellness influencer today who you think might be treading into conspirituality or QAnon territory, use the word sovereignty, as in bodily sovereignty. They are actually whether they know it or not, they are drawing on a key term that Posse Comitatus used to describe the status of the sovereign citizen. And really what this movement was about was, as you say, it was about trying to reestablish or at least visualize a white ethno-state that, where people could be a law unto themselves, which meant that they could shoot Black people really when they wanted to.
Yeah, absolutely. Other thing that's occurring to me right now is a lot of this kind of throwaway language where they can make some very inflammatory statements, but plausible deniability. Well, I never encouraged anybody to do this. It reminded me of what was going on with the anti-abortion movement. Again, in the 80s and the 90s in particular, where words like genocide, Holocaust, murder, slaughter, all of this was being used. And of course, you had mentally unstable people who were going around and killing doctors and other medical providers.
Right.
Who are providing abortion, and
Right.
we don't endorse violence. We're just going to use language that mentally unbalanced people can then run with.
Right. Yeah. And I think your point about, who is the audience, and how vulnerable are they to emotional agitation, and how easily can they be recruited into actions against their best interests or that are actually dangerous to them. That's super, super important point. And yeah, it's like I've spent enough time in the yoga and wellness worlds to know that so many people come because they struggle with mental health issues. And so, if they wind up tuning in to some, alt health libertarian fest from Bali, and they hear Sasha Stone say something like, what's going on in Australia. Here's another quote. It's called treason, people. Look up the word treason. It's punishable by death. It always has been. It hasn't actually been in Australia since 1914, but he doesn't care about that. So it's like, yeah, like how many matches are you going to strike and throw onto the tinderbox of people's, vulnerable paranoias, right?
Yeah.
A few years ago, and there's a number of different examples of this, but Facebook, Twitter, Google, they promised to make changes and basically do some censorship because of the so-called manipulation by Russia of the U.S. election, and some very strange things happened. Certain sites that didn't seem to have anything to do with such a campaign were blocked. Many of them explicitly political, and often left-wing political. So the World Socialist website is a great example.
Right.
And then later on, personal story. I've had a storied, amazing writing career that, of course, that everybody listening and watching knows about. You know my work. You love my work. You've seen it all around the internet. But one of the many incredible, high-paying, high-prestige gigs I had was writing quizzes for Facebook, and you might have seen them if you've been on social media. And then there is a theory that that such quizzes had been used to harvest data for the Trump campaign. This later actually turned out to be false, but that theory was circulated. So Facebook said, we're going to clamp down on these quizzes, and my contract ended early. I was out of a job. So I'm using a few of these examples, and you probably know where I'm going with this. But Facebook and Twitter have both announced that they're aggressively clamping down and censoring QAnon. Do you think that this is a good thing and a good way to go about addressing this issue? Because I know that there can be some unpleasant side effects.
1000%. I think it's a great thing. But I do have to say that I'm not familiar with the history of the side effects. So, the World Socialist website that you mentioned, I hadn't heard that story. So obviously that collateral damage has to be looked at and taken care of. But the fact is that QAnon grew not only because of the internet usage of the anxious housebound in when lockdown started, but also because the Facebook recommendation engine actually promoted groups to connect people who were adjacent to their content interests, right? And so Facebook and Twitter are primarily responsible for the enormity of this movement so far, and they've done almost nothing. I mean, the purge of last week was a very strong action, and we'll see how it plays out and how well QAnon will be at at ban evasion, how much coded language they'll start using, how they'll reform. The data scientists are looking at how many people are reestablishing themselves on MeWe and Telegram, which are much less accessible. There's not a lot of regular middle class boomers that are going to go to Telegram to get their fix of conspirituality. So it's a really, really good thing, and it works. Like when Mickey Willis's Plandemic soared to like 20 million views through Facebook and through the promotion primarily of Christiane Northrup, whose post of it on May 5th actually transmitted that video from QAnon groups to mainstream wellness groups, and then it was off to the races. 20 million views of that first 24-minute excerpt from his fake documentary was kind of amazing. And when Facebook decided to deplatform it, he really had to swim upstream to get a fraction of the same numbers on Brian Rose's London Real TV platform to watch the full production of the video. Now, of course, the full documentary was, 4 times as long as the preview, and at least 8 times as bad. So I mean, it's not like there's a lot of it could have had low numbers just because people hated it, but his reach was definitely impacted by the deplatforming, and Mr. Ahmed of the CCDH said that that David Icke's deplatforming from YouTube reduced his subscribership overnight from 250,000, I think, on YouTube to something around 40,000 on BitChute. Now he's gonna grow that slowly, but it's gonna be harder for him to do. And so deplatforming is super, super, super effective and important, I believe, when it comes to something as noxious as QAnon, as corrosive to so many parts of our civil discourse and our relational matrix.
And to clarify a statement that you made earlier in that explanation, you can make the argument that these are not passive platforms, because you mentioned the Facebook algorithm actually played a role in radicalizing people, of delivering the content to them. So it's much more complex that you can make the argument. It's much more complex
absolutely.
than I made a post.
They've made money. They've made money on the expansion of QAnon because it increases engagement and it leverages advertising and attention dollars. Absolutely, yeah. They've made money on the proliferation of anti-vax groups. They have made money on whatever has been engaging, and what ends up being engaging is inflammatory and often disinformation based. And I don't know if you both saw The Social Dilemma, but there's a lot of people in that industry who are waking up to the shit show they've created and kind of going and kind of shrugging their shoulders and doing this kind of I woke up too late, but I'm a tech bro and I want things to be better, but I don't know how we're going to control this now. A little bit, it was disquieting to see so many smart guys, all guys really, saying, well, I guess we had good intentions, but I guess it's just so bad. It's so bad, and the just the dopamine cycle for them of watching the engagement just exponentially increase their market share and their earning potential. That's a juggernaut that I think was just impossible to put the brakes on. And even now, I think the executive of YouTube yesterday said, well, we're not going to commit to removing QAnon, material. And I'm like, what are you even talking about? What are you even talking about? This is the FBI has declared it a domestic terrorist threat. Congress just condemned it, with 17 Republicans, refusing to or saying no to the condemnation bill resolution. It's like, what is YouTube? Is it a separate country? What is it? I don't understand. I don't understand how a private company is somehow allowed to have more of an impact over the brain tissue of civil society than its governments do, when the governments are supposed to be liberal democracies. It doesn't make any sense. So it's this weird thing watching people say to the YouTube exec, so are you going to do something? And she's like, oh, I don't know, we're trying to look at it really carefully. And it's like that meme with the dog in the house where it's all burning and the dog has grin on his face. It's like, come on, I know you're paralyzed because money is literally pouring into your clothes from outer space and making you stiff and unable to walk. But do something.
I know
unfortunately,
we need to
sorry.
wrap. I just wanted to say something here. I know then we have to wrap up.
Yeah.
I wanted to point out that I recently reported on a situation with the FCC versus Prometheus project, which is a lawsuit regarding the FCC's loosening of the public airwaves in the U.S. and making it more available to consolidations and less accountable to local communities. I'm seeing some parallels here, but of course, as Deacon Jonathan brings up, we have to conclude the show. But I just wanted to mention that because you hit on something right there. I loved it, Matthew.
Right. Well, thank you.
And I hate to wrap it up. We didn't get through all our questions. We could probably go all night. But Matthew, thanks again. And we won't book you right away. We'll allow you to have a Wednesday evening to yourself. But we'd love for you to come back because I know that we're still bubbling and there's still more to talk about.
Well,
but,
and on to that point, like I think the work that I'm doing now that actually allows me the privilege of being able to talk to QAnon devotees is super fascinating to me. And I think because this is going to be with us for a long time, I think it's really important to humanize it as much as possible, and that means trying to understand what they're really saying about their daily experience with this stuff. So I'd be happy to talk about that anytime.
Thank you so much.
Amazing. Thank you. Okay, well, that's it, everybody, for now at least. Thanks again, and we hope you enjoyed the show as much as we did. So this is Deacon John signing off.
Take care.
Bye.